Welcome back, adventurers, to another installment of Grug the Grung Stories and More, where we offer repose to the weary and glory to the brave. I am Grug the Grung, and this here is my pawn. Today is a very special day because, as the title points out, this is the first video I make with adventurers subscribed to the pawn. So, I want to extend a special thanks to you guys for joining me on this journey to level 20. Today's tale involves an egocentric misogynist that tried to solve the party's problems with a touch of war crime. As the premise suggests, warning of racism and sexism, which I will announce later in the story, so if you'd like to click away afterwards or skip to the end, feel free to do so. Now, I promise there is a satisfying end to this tale. So put on your best garments and grab yourself some ale, for tonight we feast! Row post! This is my first post on this subreddit, so please bear with me. This all happened about 6 months ago. I've been playing RPGs for about 8 years and DMing for about 4. I've played and run a variety of systems, and most recently I've gotten into a game called Savage Worlds, the system that Deadlands is running. Its most current edition is Savage Worlds Adventure Edition, abbreviated as SWADE for the rest of the story. And it's a very fun system. I won't go too much into detail as it's not super important for the story, but there are a few things that will be relevant. Namely that Savage Worlds is setting neutral. There are several published settings, everything from fantasy to cyberpunk, sci-fi, western, pirates, basically you name it. It's also a system that has no set classes. There are builds you can do that sort of follow or mimic traditional character classes, but all options are available to a character. And what really defines your character is the positive and negative traits you choose along with the special abilities you chose to invest in. But moving on. Problem player. We'll just call him Rob. Rob was a guy I had met looking for groups to play SWADE. He was nice enough to introduce me to a large Discord community where I could look for and advertise Savage Worlds games. He even helped me put together my first LFG post on that Discord. When I put out the post looking for players, I had a surprising amount of responses. I thought that Rob would be a good player to have in the game, and I added 3 more players for a total of 4. The game I wanted to run would take place in my homebrew setting. It would be a fantasy adventure where the players start off as conscripts in the army of a corrupt baron. I told the players that all they knew was there was some concern that the neighboring country of mostly nomadic tribes was begging to show aggression, and some tribes had even combined and began raiding across the border. They all showed a lot of excitement at this, and had their characters made quickly. We were starting as brand new novice characters, essentially level 1, so it wasn't exactly a major chore. The problems with Rob started when I was double checking character sheets in Roll20. Everyone else had filled out their character sheets completely, but he hadn't even touched his. He'd been posting in the Discord I'd made for the game a lot about his character and how excited he was for it. I reviewed his posts and started getting a little concerned. The game I was running was explicitly a fantasy game in a very early Iron Age setting. Crossbows were still a new invention to this part of the world kind of setting. But the most consistent thing that came across in his posts was talking about a greedy investigator character like Columbo. I quickly googled it, as many of us are probably doing right now, and then messaged him saying I wasn't sure a TV detective-like character would really work in this setting. He assured me he'd adapt and change things to fit better, and I was wary but let it go. A week later, and he's filled out most of his character sheet, but his equipment is still completely blank. It's 3 days till the first session, and every time I message him about it, he insists he's already done it. Eventually, I sent him screenshots of a blank page where his gear should be, and all I got in return was, weird, I did it yesterday, but must have not saved. At this point, it's pretty obvious that he's lying, but before I can decide if I should take further action, he messages me to let me know that he won't be able to make the first session. I'm a little frustrated, but he did help me make my first post and invited me to the Discord, so I felt like I owed him, so I said it would be alright. The first session. The party starts as tent mates about 2 miles north of the river in a camp of other conscripts. Every soldier there, except for the top officers, have been recently and forcefully drafted into the army. There are a lot of rumors going around the campfires, and the 3 present players there do a great job gathering info and get a good idea that something strange is up. As the call for fire sound is called out, one of the party members notices a few of the officers sneaking off into the dark, not carrying torches. He follows them and catches them paying off some thugs. The thugs promptly dress up as nomads and then ride a short distance while the officers ride in the opposite direction. After a few minutes, the thugs are no longer visible, but there are dozens of firelights illuminating horse riders coming straight for the camp. To cut forward, the party managed to hide as a group of mercenaries masquerading as nomads overran the camp who fled towards the river. The session ends as the party hastily leaves the town where the soldiers threaten them for spreading lies that the nomads aren't the ones attacking people from the river. Over the next week, there is a lot of excited discussion in the Discord about what the motives of the officers might have been for bribing the mercs. How high the conspiracy goes, if they need to deal with it themselves, or if they should report this to the king. Not a peep from Rob. I messaged him repeatedly to finish up his character and fill out his equipment. No response. I'm hoping he'll just drop out, but I decided to let things be and see how they play out. A day before the second session, he messaged me claiming he didn't know how his character could work with the party. I inquired why, and he explained that his character is only interested in finding his parents, and wouldn't care about the things going out on the province. I tried to explore some ideas that could work as to why working with the party might help the character's goals, and we reached a tentative understanding that his character could work with them for the time being. It wasn't ideal, but I had a lot going on and figured, what's the worst that could happen? I know. Famous last words. Okay, so we are starting to see some major red flags coming from Rob. He came up with a character that did not fit into the setting OP created. Said he would adapt his character, which he didn't. Lied about his character sheet, which he also didn't complete. Disappeared for the better part of the first week, and when he finally emerged, declared he wasn't interested in working with the party and tried to have things his way. You can excuse the disappearance with poor time management, but everything else points out to the conclusion that you're dealing with an individual that cares about no one but themselves. Indeed, a lot worse will definitely happen. Back to the post. Second session. The party, on their way to a city run by a magical order, independently run from the rest of the province, decides to stay at an inn on the road that overlooks a small plain and then the river till the horizon. They're worried that the officers might have people looking for any survivors of the attack from the previous night, and so the stealthiest party member goes to take a look first. He meets the innkeeper, a balding dwarf who's also missing many teeth, out back on his way from drawing water. All seems well, so the party joins them. They openly share with the innkeeper what happened, and he expresses sympathy and a desire to help. Turns out that his wife is one of the Ankatia people herself, and she's quite certain that the recent attacks have been orchestrated to annex the fertile lands south of the river. The paranoid magician in the group suggests they discuss things inside, and this is where they meet Rob's character. The interior of the inn is one large room with a sunken dirt floor, fire pit, and several alcoves surrounding it where there are mats for sleeping. As they enter this room, they see the innkeeper's wife wrapping fresh bandages around a large man's injured arm. They also see 2 other similar-looking figures with many bandages as well, sitting in another alcove and talking with Rob's character. The triplets. I can't remember if the players found this out before or after Rob introduced his character, so I'll share this now. The 3 injured people were a set of triplets that I intended to give to the party. In Suede, players get to control some allied NPCs in combat, and I wanted to introduce this early on and give them more powerful allies as the game progressed. They asked for the triplets' names, 2 men and a woman, and after admitting I hadn't thought of any, they quickly came up with the names Bob, Frank, and Sheila. We had a good laugh about it, and I enthusiastically named them accordingly. These triplets weren't just mercenaries. They were from the same group that was being paid to maraud while dressed up as nomads. They weren't part of the group that attacked the party's camp in the first session. but instead were the only survivors from an attack much further upriver. They were in a desperate situation when they had agreed to the job, and they didn't suspect that their group, instead of being used to destroy a camp of conscripts, would be sent against a standing detachment from the actual military. They were obliterated and driven or thrown into the river, no evidence left behind if they were real nomads. After they floated dying in the river for several days, the innkeeper's wife pulled them from the river. She nursed them back to health, and even after the guilt caused them to confess their crime against her people, she still continued to heal them. This, I hoped, would cement to the party that the nomads were in no way responsible for the attacks, and that if they were even half as kind as this woman was, they surely didn't deserve to be invaded. Rob's character. When I asked Rob to introduce his character, I actually had a little bit of hope. He gave a good description and even jumped into some impromptu roleplay. My character is asking the sister of the triplets, "Before we finish, could you give me that description of the man's face one more time?" He was doing a thick New Yorkish accent, which wasn't great, but was tolerable. I bet mine wasn't, but here we are. So I just realized I don't really know if the innkeeper's wife is also a dwarf, but I will assume that because of the way Scar is written. So here we go. I tried to lean into his prompt and replied, yes, sorry, it's still a little fuzzy. He had a big scout. Okay, this is post-production. I tried doing the accent. I freaking suck. I haven't tried or even attempted before this point, so I think I'll just skip it because I think I'm sounding kind of, racy, but I swear, I don't know. I haven't practiced the accent. I'll just go back to my regular Californian accent, okay? I apologize. Moving on. I tried to lean into his prompt and replied, yes, sorry, it's still a little fuzzy. He had a big scar down his face from eye to chin. His eye, I think his left eye was all cloudy, and the part of the scar over his mouth was widely spread. You could see his brown teeth. Rob's character thanked her for her description and then formally introduced himself to the party. Things were going pretty well as they all got caught up to speed and met one another. I actually started to think I'd been wrong about him. Then, one of the party members interjected. At this point, it was clear that the triplets would join the party and help them stop the impending war, and the player asked, "So, what are we gonna do about the Baron?" The innkeeper and his wife sat down to be a part of the discussion. There were some ideas thrown around. They included going to warn the nomads, traveling to the previously mentioned Mage City to get their help, and of course, going to tell the king about what one of his nobles was doing. Rob stopped all the discussion by scoffing loudly into the mic and his character saying, "Tuh, wouldn't it be easier to just get rid of the nomads?" A long pause followed. As the innkeeper's wife, I spoke up. My people are proud and won't just leave their homelands to be taken from them. I wasn't sure what Rob meant, but I was hoping he was advocating for a peaceful solution by relocating the nomads. All the other players agreed that asking the nomads to just give away their home wouldn't work. This upset Rob. No, listen. I've got it all figured out, see. Rulers and politicians are all corrupt. They rig elections, bribe officials, take what they can. There were no elections like what he was referring to. There weren't any democracies in this part of the setting. If we kill the Baron, then the next guy in line will just continue on with the same plans anyway. There was no reason to think that. And two other players tried to interrupt and explain how they could avoid that. He spoke over them and continued. We all just want this to be over with. Therefore, he cleared his throat dramatically. If we wipe out the nomads first, the Baron won't need any more conscripts, and we'll be free to go. Another long pause. The other players began hesitantly to pick apart his reasoning. I described how the NPCs looked disgusted and confused. The innkeeper and his wife looked downright murderous as they listened to the stranger casually talk about the genocide of her people. One of the players asked, "Do you really not see the problem with killing an entire nation of people? Never mind that there are tens of thousands of them and we number just a few. But that sounds flat out evil. The nomads are peaceful. They lived in those lands for 1,000 years. And you think it's okay to just get rid of them?" Rob's character shrugged. I don't think it's a big deal. Land changes hands all the time. They no doubt stole it 1,000 years ago, so it's not like really theirs. Trigger warning, racism and sexism incoming. Alright people, this is a safe spot where you can click away or skip ahead. If future me, or past me for you guys, figured out how to place timestamps, then you can use those for your commodity as well. Time's up! Let the post resume. He continued. They're just a bunch of towel-headed, worrying primitives anyway, fellas. Is it really that much of a loss? My stomach dropped. I'd never heard anything like this before as a DM. I didn't really know what to do. After another long silence, I finally spoke up. The wife stands up, slapping you full in the face and yells, "Get out!" I described her, explaining how insulted she was and that Rob was lucky to be allowed to live after the things he said. I was trying to defuse him to let him know that his ideas, which I hoped they were only his character's opinions and not his own, were not gonna fly. Maybe we could salvage things and Rob could still join the party somehow. What he said next crushed any hope I had for him. Could someone shut this bitch up? She's getting uppity. Every player immediately spoke up at that. We had all been somewhat shocked into silence, but it finally broke. Angry words started flying and I immediately called a break and pulled Rob into a private call. I asked him to explain himself and he acted very indignant. Apparently, he couldn't understand what he had done wrong and went on to say I didn't really understand his character or the setting. My own setting! I told him I needed a drink of water and ended the call. Every player had messaged me asking me to kick him, and at this point I needed no convincing. I didn't bother telling him. I kicked him from the game on Roll20, locked him in Discord, and let the other players know. We all joined the voice call again and started talking it over. I broke down. I'd never had anyone be that hateful in a game of D&D. I was shaking. The players and I talked it through. We ended the session there for that day. The next session opened with them brutally beating the piss out of what was formerly Rob's character. He limped off and after trying to set fire to the inn, was unceremoniously beheaded by the innkeeper's wife. The game lasted a couple months after that. The entire thing felt a little tainted with everything that happened with Rob. We had a lot of laughs about it all before we ended the game. Since then, I've been much more thorough when I vet my players. TLDR, racist player makes bad TV detective knockoff and advocates for genocide instead of stopping a war. Well, there you have it folks, a proper ending for a self-absorbed BBEG. I want to give props to OP for being a good DM all the way. They were patient until the bitter end and gave Rob the benefit of the doubt until Rob finished digging their own grave. Once shit hit the fan, OP pulled Rob into a call for one last chance before cutting him loose. And to top it all off, they handled the sour situation magnificently in-game as well, with Rob's character meeting their demise. Simply, mwah, chef's kiss. It also just dawned upon me that Rob, given that he had agreed to tag along for a little while only, might have suggested a quick solution to wrap up this part of the story so the plot could progress into something about his character's storyline. I guess somewhere in his mind that seemed like a proper way to get the attention back to him. Moral of the story, don't be sexist, or racist, or any kind of cis, or phobic whatsoever. Be cool. Be like OP and the players that did not stand for any of that stuff and immediately kicked Rob out. You don't need that type of toxicity in your life. That's it for today, folks. Thank you for stopping by and I hope your rest dice have treated you well. If you have enjoyed your stay here today at the pond, feel free to drop a like and follow the channel for more stories to come. Good luck out there, adventurers, and remember to be cool. Till we meet again.